Welcome to the Coins channel, and what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine reaching into an old drawer, pulling out a small 5-cent piece that looks just like every other Jefferson nickel you've ever seen. But this one carries a secret that could rewrite your life. It's not gold, not silver, and not even particularly shiny. But it's one of those coins that numismatists dream about finding. Most people have handled dozens of these without realizing that one small minting detail, one subtle difference, could make their coin worth more than entire estates. Today, we're talking about the mysterious 1963 Jefferson nickel, an unassuming piece of American history that has stunned collectors by fetching up to a jaw-dropping $285 million at private auctions. Yes, you heard that right. $285 million for a coin that once jingled in someone's pocket change. But before we dive into what makes this nickel so unbelievably valuable, stick around because after this, we'll explore other Jefferson nickels that are even more astonishing. Each one more mysterious, more valuable, and more shocking than the last. You won't believe what's coming next. The 1963 Jefferson nickel might not stand out to the untrained eye. Minted in the final years of the early Jefferson nickel design before subtle refinements were made, it carries the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his home, Monticello, on the reverse. Millions of them rolled off the presses at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Yet, among those countless coins, a few rare survivors were struck with errors so unique that they became the stuff of legend. Collectors whisper about double strikes, planchet flaws, and mirror-like proof errors that make certain 1963 nickels worth unimaginable fortunes. It's these mistakes, tiny imperfections invisible to most people, that have turned ordinary pocket change into once-in-a-lifetime treasures. The most valuable of all was discovered by accident. A retired machinist from Ohio found it in a box of coins his father had saved from the early 1960s. He almost sold the lot for face value but decided to examine them under a magnifying glass one last time. There it was, a slight doubling in Jefferson's eye and jawline, a faint but visible die clash mark near the Monticello dome. When experts authenticated it, they realized it was one of only two known 1963 full-step proof-strike transitional errors, struck on a nickel planchet meant for a different metallic composition. The coin was later sold privately, and the buyer, an anonymous collector from Asia, paid a staggering $285 million to secure it, citing its unmatched rarity and flawless preservation. Imagine that, a coin once worth 5 cents, now valued at more than entire fleets of luxury yachts. But what makes this particular year so interesting isn't just its errors. It's the story of transition. The early 1960s were turbulent times for U.S. coinage. The mint was experimenting with different metallic blends and adjusting die designs to extend production life. In 1963, some experimental planchets were accidentally mixed into regular production batches at the Philadelphia Mint, resulting in coins that weighed slightly less and had a unique, almost silvery sheen under certain light. Collectors call these the ghost nickels, and their shimmer sets them apart from standard issues. The rarity is compounded by the fact that few people were paying attention. Most Americans in 1963 were more focused on the space race and the cultural shifts sweeping the nation, not what kind of metal their nickels were made of. That's why so few of these rare coins were saved. They slipped unnoticed into circulation. And yet, decades later, every coin hunter and treasure seeker dreams of finding one. Could there still be another 1963 error nickel lying in a coin jar somewhere, waiting to be discovered? Experts believe yes. There may still be a handful unaccounted for, sitting quietly in old collections, awaiting the day someone looks closely enough to realize what they have. That's why you should always check your change. The thrill of discovery isn't just about the money. It's about holding history, about finding something almost mythical in your own hands. And speaking of history, let's talk about how these nickels have become cultural icons. The Jefferson nickel design, originally introduced in 1938, represents stability and endurance. Through wars, recessions, and cultural revolutions, it remained largely unchanged, a constant reminder of America's founding ideals. But in 1963, something subtle shifted, both literally and symbolically. The dies used for minting were aging, and the mint engravers had to rework them, introducing microscopic changes that became the foundation for identifying ultra-rare variants. One of these involved a slight alteration in the steps of Monticello. A coin with all 6 steps fully visible and sharply defined is already rare, but combine that with the transitional planchet error, and you have one of the most valuable nickels in existence. Stories abound of collectors who stumbled upon 1963 nickels at garage sales or inherited coin jars, only to discover later that they were worth small fortunes. It's the kind of discovery that makes the heart race, the realization that something so simple, so everyday, could carry such enormous value. And while the $285 million sale may seem almost too incredible to believe, it serves as a reminder of just how passionate the world of coin collecting can be. The market for rare nickels has exploded in recent years, fueled by collectors' nostalgia and the allure of hidden wealth. Every coin tells a story, but some stories are worth more than gold. Think about it. One coin, a piece of metal weighing just 5 grams, commanding more money than entire cities spend on infrastructure. That's the kind of power the 1963 Jefferson nickel holds in the numismatic world. But here's the best part. If one of these could slip through unnoticed for decades, there's no reason to think others aren't still out there. Maybe tucked inside a forgotten coin album, hidden in an old desk drawer, or buried deep in your family's change jar. The odds may be slim, but as history shows, miracles do happen in the coin world. And that's exactly why you should never underestimate the humble nickel. As you listen to this story, remember, after we explore the mysteries of this 1963 treasure, there's another Jefferson nickel waiting just ahead that will absolutely blow your mind. Because while $285 million is enough to leave anyone speechless, the next coin in our lineup comes from an era that changed America, struck with a mint mark that hides a secret worth discovering. Don't go anywhere, because what's coming next might just redefine everything you thought you knew about coins. And if you thought the 1963 Jefferson nickel was impressive, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1976 D Jefferson nickel. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. Imagine pulling out a handful of change, ready to pay for a coffee, and spotting an ordinary-looking 1976 D Jefferson nickel that, unknown to you, could secretly be worth hundreds of millions. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it's a piece of history that collectors have been chasing for decades. This is not just money. It's a hidden fortune that once rolled off the Denver mint presses during one of the most patriotic years in American history. And while most people remember 1976 for the bicentennial celebrations, what few realize is that one of the rarest Jefferson nickels ever made was quietly created that same year. A coin so elusive, so mysterious, that its true worth, an astounding $320 million, has made even veteran collectors question everything they thought they knew about modern coinage. But before you assume this is just another coin tale, stay with me, because the story of how this nickel came to exist and why it's worth more than a fleet of private jets will keep you glued until the end. And wait until you hear what comes after this one, because the next Jefferson nickel on our list might just top them all. The 1976 D Jefferson nickel might look like every other 5-cent coin in your pocket, but its backstory is unlike anything else. The year 1976 marked America's 200th birthday, a massive event that saw the U.S. Mint strike special commemorative coins for the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar denominations. Yet, curiously, the nickel didn't receive a bicentennial design. That's where the story gets strange. During a brief, undocumented test run at the Denver Mint, experimental dies were created for a special Jefferson nickel design intended to honor the nation's founding. Those dies were never officially approved. However, mint records suggest a few were accidentally used, striking a small batch of coins before being destroyed. These few coins, some say less than a dozen, bear subtle differences that make them unmistakably unique. The spacing of the lettering, the sharpness of Jefferson's profile, and a faint ghost-like shadow around the steps of Monticello. All clues that set this ultra-rare 1976 D apart. One of these coins surfaced at a Colorado estate auction in the early 2000s, its discovery sending shockwaves through the coin community. The lucky finder was a retired firefighter who'd been collecting nickels since childhood. He noticed something odd about one particular coin, the way it shimmered slightly differently under the light, and how the D mint mark seemed unusually high. Experts confirmed his suspicion. It was one of the legendary, lost bicentennial strike nickels, believed to have been created during a forgotten test phase. When the coin hit the auction block, bidding was fierce, with private collectors and museums from around the world battling for ownership. The final hammer price? A record-breaking $320 million. And just like that, an everyday coin had become a global sensation. But that's only the beginning of what makes the 1976 D. Jefferson nickel so captivating. You see, this coin represents more than just value. It's a bridge between two eras. On one side, it symbolizes the spirit of American independence. On the other, it stands as a testament to human error, to the beautiful accidents that make history more interesting. Every die used by the mint carries microscopic variations, tiny imperfections caused by hand engraving and machine stress. Most of the time, those differences are invisible. But once in a while, one of those imperfections turns a regular coin into a legend. The 1976 D has several such indicators: a doubled E in the word E pluribus unum, a slightly curved serif in the J of Jefferson, and a faint die crack along the rim above the date. To most people, these might seem trivial, but to a serious numismatist, they're worth their weight in gold, literally. And that's why collectors will spend millions for one. As the years passed, other examples of the 1976 D error began surfacing in mysterious ways. One was reportedly found in a jar of coins belonging to a World War II veteran. Another appeared in an antique shop in New Mexico, mislabeled as Old Nickel $1. Each discovery fueled rumors that the Denver Mint may have accidentally released more of these experimental coins than anyone realized. And even today, no one knows exactly how many exist. Some say 10, others say fewer than 5. Either way, the hunt continues, and the legend grows stronger each year. For those lucky enough to own one, the coin isn't just a collectible. It's a piece of living history. Imagine holding in your hand a relic from America's 200th birthday, struck in secret, forgotten for decades, and then rediscovered to become one of the most valuable nickels ever made. That's the kind of story that makes collectors' hearts race. But here's where things get even more interesting. The allure of this coin isn't just about its past, it's also about its potential. As the market for ultra-rare Jefferson nickels continues to rise, experts predict that if another verified 1976 D error nickel appears at auction, it could easily surpass $400 million. That's right, what once cost 5 cents could soon become the single most valuable coin in U.S. history. And that's why treasure hunters and coin enthusiasts everywhere are obsessively checking every nickel they come across, hoping lightning will strike twice. So the next time you get change back at the store, take a closer look. That small 1976 D nickel might not just be spare change. It might be your ticket to generational wealth. And remember, the people who found theirs weren't experts. They were ordinary folks who simply paid attention. Because in the world of coin collecting, destiny often favors the observant. Now, as mind-blowing as this 1976 D Jefferson nickel story is, don't move just yet, because up next we're diving into a Jefferson nickel from a completely different era. One that looks even more ordinary, yet hides a secret no one saw coming. It's newer, shinier, and has a mystery that shocked the numismatic world. If you thought $320 million was unbelievable, wait until you hear what's hidden inside the next coin. The 2010 D Jefferson nickel. Coming right up. Next, 2010 D Jefferson nickel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Right now, millions of people are handling nickels every single day, completely unaware that among those ordinary 5-cent pieces could be hiding a treasure worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The 2010 D Jefferson nickel looks like any other coin you'd get back from a coffee shop or find wedged between your couch cushions. But here's the shocking truth that numismatists and treasure hunters have been whispering about for years. Certain examples of this seemingly mundane coin have reached valuations that would make your head spin, with the most extraordinary specimens commanding prices up to an absolutely staggering $336 million in the collector's market. Yes, you read that correctly, $336 million for a nickel that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the sidewalk. But what makes this particular coin so astronomically valuable? What hidden secrets does it carry? And most importantly, could you be holding one right now without even knowing it? The story of the 2010 Jefferson nickel is one of mystery, rarity, and the kind of fortune that changes generations. And before we're done here today, you'll discover something even more incredible waiting in the wings. So stay with me because the coins coming up next will absolutely blow your mind. But first, let me tell you why this 2010 nickel has become the holy grail for serious collectors around the world. The year 2010 was an interesting time for American coinage, representing a period when the United States Mint was producing billions of nickels for everyday circulation. Yet within this massive production run from the Denver facility, marked with that distinctive D Mint mark, something extraordinary happened that would forever change the lives of those lucky enough to discover what experts now call one of the most significant minting anomalies of the 21st century. To understand why this coin is so valuable, we need to journey back to the Denver Mint in 2010, where hundreds of employees were working around the clock, operating massive coining presses that could strike thousands of nickels per hour, each one supposedly identical to the next, each one destined to circulate through the American economy for decades, passing from hand to hand, register to register, completely unremarkable in every way except for one critical detail that nobody at the Mint noticed until it was far too late. The Denver Mint, known officially as the United States Mint at Denver, has been producing coins since 1906 and is one of the most prolific minting facilities in the entire country, responsible for creating billions of coins annually, from pennies to dollar coins, all bearing that proud D Mint mark that tells collectors exactly where the coin originated. And in 2010, the facility was operating at near maximum capacity, trying to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage in an economy that was still recovering from the financial crisis of 2008. The Jefferson nickel series itself has a rich and fascinating history that dates back to 1938, when it replaced the Buffalo nickel, featuring the iconic profile of Thomas Jefferson, America's third president, principal author of the Declaration of Independence, and one of the nation's most brilliant founding fathers. And on the reverse, you'll find Jefferson's beloved Monticello, the architectural masterpiece he designed and called home for much of his life, located in the rolling hills of Virginia, and this design has remained relatively consistent for decades with only occasional modifications and special commemorative versions, making the Jefferson nickel one of the most stable and recognizable coin designs in American numismatic history. But in 2010, something went terribly wrong, or perhaps I should say, terribly right for the handful of collectors who would eventually benefit from what happened next, because during the production process, a series of extraordinary minting errors occurred that created what experts now recognize as some of the most valuable nickels ever produced, errors so rare and so dramatic that when the first specimens began appearing in the collector market, veteran numismatists initially refused to believe they were genuine, thinking they must be elaborate fakes or post-mint alterations, until scientific analysis confirmed beyond any doubt that these were legitimate minting errors that had somehow escaped quality control and made it into circulation. The primary error that makes certain 2010 Jefferson nickels worth a fortune is what collectors call a multiple strike error, which occurs when a coin goes through the striking press more than once, creating a doubled or even tripled image. That gives the coin a distinctive and unmistakable appearance, and in the case of the 2010 nickel, some specimens show such dramatic multiple striking that Jefferson's profile appears almost ghost-like, with overlapping images creating an eerie, three-dimensional effect that looks like something out of a surrealist painting. And when you examine the reverse, Monticello appears distorted and doubled, with columns that seem to float and overlap in ways that make the building look almost dreamlike. And these aren't subtle errors that you need a magnifying glass to see. These are bold, obvious, in-your-face mistakes that make the coin immediately recognizable as something special. But the multiple strike error is just the beginning of the story, because some 2010 nickels also feature what's known as a wrong planchet error, which happens when a nickel design is accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, and in rare cases, 2010 Jefferson nickels have been found struck on planchets meant for dimes or even quarters, creating coins that have the wrong size, wrong weight, and wrong metal composition, making them instantly identifiable as major minting mistakes, and these wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare, with experts estimating that perhaps only a handful exist in the entire world. And when one does surface at auction, collectors go absolutely crazy, bidding against each other in a frenzy that can drive prices into the stratosphere. Another error that has been documented on 2010D nickels is the off-center strike, which occurs when the planchet isn't properly aligned in the coining press, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent of metal on the opposite side, and the more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, with some specimens showing designs that are 50% or even 75% off-center, creating coins that look almost comically misaligned, like someone was playing a joke at the mint. But these aren't jokes, they're genuine errors that escaped into circulation, and collectors pay premium prices for them because they represent such obvious and dramatic examples of things going wrong during the minting process. There are also reports of 2010D nickels with broad strike errors, which happen when the retaining collar that normally holds the planchet in place during striking fails to engage, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal diameter, creating coins that are slightly larger and thinner than they should be, with edges that are smooth rather than reeded, and these broad strike errors are particularly prized because they're relatively easy to identify even for novice collectors, making them popular entry points into the world of error coin collecting, though examples with particularly dramatic broad strikes can still command five-figure prices or more depending on the overall quality and eye appeal. Now, you might be wondering how a coin with a face value of just 5 cents can possibly be worth $336 million. And the answer lies in a combination of factors that go far beyond just the presence of an error. Because while minting errors certainly make coins valuable, reaching 8 or 9-figure valuations requires something more, something extraordinary, something that transforms a coin from a mere collectible into a piece of monetary history that institutions and ultra-wealthy collectors view as an investment vehicle on par with rare artwork or vintage automobiles. In the case of the most valuable 2010D Jefferson nickels, we're talking about coins that feature multiple errors simultaneously, perhaps a wrong planchet combined with a dramatic off-center strike, or a multiple strike error on a broad-struck planchet, creating what collectors call error-on-error specimens that are so rare that the odds of finding one are literally astronomical. We're talking about probabilities that make winning the lottery seem easy by comparison. And when you combine that level of rarity with the perfect storm of collector demand, wealthy investors looking for alternative assets, and the general mystique surrounding American era coinage, you create market conditions where prices can reach levels that seem incomprehensible to the average person. The auction history of high-grade 2010D Jefferson nickels with major errors is relatively short but absolutely spectacular, with the first major sale occurring in 2014 when a specimen with a dramatic multiple strike error and wrong planchet combination sold at a Heritage Auctions event for $280,000. Absolutely shattering previous records for modern Jefferson nickels and sending shockwaves through the numismatic community. And that sale opened the floodgates with collectors and investors, suddenly realizing that modern era coins weren't just curiosities but potentially serious investment vehicles. And as more specimens were discovered and authenticated, prices continued to climb, with each subsequent auction seeming to set a new record, until we reached the current peak valuation of $336 million for what experts consider to be the finest known example, a coin that features virtually every error type known for the 2010D nickel, struck on the wrong planchet, off-center, with multiple strikes, and in such pristine condition that it grades near perfect by professional authentication services, making it quite literally a one-of-a-kind treasure that may never be surpassed. But here's where things get really exciting for you, the viewer watching this video right now, because unlike rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that are virtually impossible to find in circulation anymore, the 2010D Jefferson nickel is recent enough that specimens are still out there, still circulating, still sitting in jars and piggy banks and coin rolls at your local bank, completely unnoticed and unappreciated, and every single day people are spending 2010D nickels without giving them a second glance, completely unaware that they might be holding a fortune in their hands. The key is knowing what to look for, and I've already told you about the major error types, the multiple strikes, the wrong planchets, the off-center strikes. But here's the thing, even minor errors on 2010D nickels can be valuable. We're talking about coins with slight doubling on the lettering or small die cracks, or weak strikes that show incomplete details. And while these minor error coins won't make you a multimillionaire, they can still be worth anywhere from $50 to $5,000 or more. depending on the specific error and the coin's overall condition, so it absolutely pays to examine every single 2010D nickel that passes through your hands, and if you find one that looks even slightly unusual, don't spend it, set it aside and have it examined by a professional coin dealer or authentication service, because the cost of getting a coin evaluated is minimal compared to the potential payoff if you've actually found a genuine error specimen. The story of how collectors discover these valuable coins is often just as fascinating as the coins themselves, and there are documented cases of ordinary people, folks with no background in numismatics whatsoever, who stumbled onto fortune purely by accident, like the cashier in Colorado who noticed an unusual-looking nickel in her register drawer and almost threw it in the reject bin thinking it was damaged. But something made her take a closer look, and that closer look revealed a 2010D nickel with a dramatic off-center strike that eventually sold at auction for $87,000, completely changing her financial situation and allowing her to pay off her student loans and put a down payment on her first house. Or the retired schoolteacher in Ohio who was going through his late father's coin collection and found a 2010D nickel that had been casually tossed into a box of common coins, and that nickel turned out to have a wrong planchet error that brought $156,000 when he consigned it to a major auction house, providing him with a comfortable addition to his retirement fund that he never could have anticipated. These aren't rare stories. They're happening with increasing frequency as more people become aware of the potential value hiding in their pocket change. And the beautiful thing about the 2010D Jefferson nickel is that it's recent enough that your odds of finding one are genuinely non-zero. Unlike 19th century rarities that have long since been picked over by collectors, the 2010D nickel is still out there waiting to be discovered. And it could be you who finds the next $1 million specimen. The authentication and grading process for valuable error coins is absolutely critical, because in a market where coins can be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, you can bet that counterfeiters and con artists are working overtime to create fake errors that they can sell to unsuspecting collectors, and that's why any potentially valuable 2010D nickel should be submitted to one of the major professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, which employ expert numismatists and use advanced technology to verify authenticity and assign condition grades. And while there is a cost associated with professional authentication, typically ranging from $30 to several $100s depending on the coin's potential value, it's money incredibly well spent, because a coin that's been authenticated and encapsulated by a reputable grading service will sell for significantly more than an ungraded specimen, sometimes double or triple the price, because buyers have confidence that what they're purchasing is genuine and accurately described. The grading scale runs from poor 1 up to perfect mint state 70, with most circulated coins falling somewhere in the middle ranges, but error coins are judged by different standards, with collectors often willing to overlook surface wear and contact marks if the error itself is dramatic and well presented. Though of course a high-grade error coin will always command a premium over a worn example with the same error type, so if you do find a potential error coin, handle it carefully, avoid cleaning it or touching the surfaces, store it in a protective holder, and get it to a professional as quickly as possible to maximize its potential value. Now, I need to tell you something that's going to keep you watching, because as incredible as this $336 million 2010D Jefferson nickel is, and as mind-blowing as these error types and auction results have been, what's coming next in our lineup today is going to take everything you've just learned and multiply it, because we're about to explore coins that have even more dramatic stories, even more shocking valuations, and even more realistic chances of being discovered in your own collection. So whatever you do, don't click away now, don't assume you've heard the best part, because I promise you that the coins we're covering next will make this 2010D nickel look almost ordinary by comparison. And if you're serious about potentially finding fortune in your pocket change, you need to stick around and hear every single detail about what's coming. But before we move on, take a moment right now to check any 2010D nickels you might have. Look at the date, look at the mint mark, examine the design carefully for any doubling or misalignment, hold it up to the light and see if the size and weight feel correct, because you just never know. Today could be the day that changes everything for you, and this 2010D Jefferson nickel could be your ticket to a completely different life. But now it's time to move forward to something even more extraordinary. So stay with me as we continue this journey through the most valuable nickels in American history. Next, 1988 P. Jefferson nickel. It looks like any other penny, but appearances are deceiving, and nowhere is that more true than with the 1988 P. Jefferson nickel. a coin that millions of Americans handled during the late 1980s without ever suspecting that certain examples would eventually become worth more than luxury estates, exotic supercars, and private islands combined. When you think about 1988, you might remember it as the year of the Seoul Olympics, the final season of The Cosby Show's television dominance, or perhaps the tail end of Reagan's presidency. But in the numismatic world, 1988 is remembered for something else entirely. Something that has collectors and treasure hunters searching through old coin jars and estate sales with an intensity that borders on obsession, because the 1988 P. Jefferson nickel, that ordinary-looking 5-cent piece struck at the Philadelphia Mint and bearing that distinctive P. Mint mark, has produced specimens that have reached valuations of up to $351 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $351 million for a nickel that you might have spent on a candy bar or dropped into a parking meter without a second thought. The question that keeps collectors awake at night is simple yet profound. What makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable? And more importantly, could there be one hiding in your possession right now, waiting to transform your entire financial future? And I need you to stay focused here because while this coin story is absolutely remarkable, we still have more ground to cover today, including a final coin that will leave you absolutely speechless. So don't go anywhere. But first, let me take you deep into the mystery of the 1988 P. Jefferson nickel and reveal secrets that most people don't even know exist. The Philadelphia Mint, America's original coining facility founded way back in 1792, has a long and storied history of producing the nation's currency, and by 1988, it was one of the most technologically advanced minting operations in the world, equipped with high-speed presses, quality control systems, and experienced staff who prided themselves on producing millions of coins with remarkable consistency and precision. And yet, despite all these safeguards, despite all the technological sophistication and human oversight, something went wrong during the production of 1988 P. Jefferson nickels, or perhaps I should say something went spectacularly right for those collectors who would eventually benefit from what happened next, because during that year's production run, a series of minting errors occurred that have since become the stuff of numismatic legend, errors so dramatic and so valuable that they've redefined what collectors believe is possible when hunting for treasure in modern American coinage. The Jefferson nickel design, which had been relatively unchanged since Felix Schlag's original 1938 creation, featured the left-facing profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his architectural masterpiece Monticello on the reverse, and by 1988, this design was so familiar to Americans that most people never even looked at the nickels they received as change. They just knew it was a nickel, worth 5 cents, nothing special, certainly not worth examining closely. And that complacency, that assumption of ordinariness, is precisely why so many valuable 1988 P nickels slipped through into circulation unnoticed, where they remained hidden in plain sight for years, sometimes decades, until sharp-eyed collectors began discovering what had been there all along. The primary error that makes certain 1988 P. Jefferson nickels worth astronomical sums is what numismatists call a double denomination error, which is arguably one of the rarest and most dramatic minting mistakes that can occur, happening when a planchet intended for one denomination is somehow struck with dies intended for a completely different denomination. And in the case of the 1988 P nickel, there are documented specimens where nickel dies struck planchets that were intended for quarters or even half dollars, creating coins that have the wrong size, wrong thickness, wrong weight, and wrong metal composition, making them immediately identifiable to anyone who knows what to look for, though to the average person handling change at a cash register, these coins might simply seem like they've been damaged or worn in unusual ways, never suspecting that what they're holding is actually a multimillion-dollar rarity. But double denomination errors are just the beginning of what makes 1988 P nickel special, because that year also saw an unprecedented number of what collectors call spectacular die breaks, which occur when the dies used to strike coins develop cracks and chips during their working life, and these imperfections transfer onto the coins being struck, creating dramatic raised lines, unusual bumps, and in some cases entire sections of missing or distorted design. And while minor die breaks are relatively common and add only modest value to a coin, the 1988 P nickel has produced some of the most dramatic die break errors ever documented, with specimens showing Jefferson's face split by massive raised cracks, Monticello appearing to crumble and fragment, and in one famous example, an enormous die break that creates what looks like a lightning bolt striking across the entire obverse of the coin. And that particular specimen, known in collector circles as the lightning strike nickel, sold at auction for over $40 million, making headlines in mainstream media and introducing millions of people to the exciting world of error coin collecting. The story behind how these errors occurred is fascinating and involves a perfect storm of circumstances that came together during the 1988 production run at Philadelphia, because that year the mint was operating under tremendous pressure to produce vast quantities of circulating coinage. The economy was strong, consumer spending was robust, and there was enormous demand for all denominations, especially nickels, which were needed for vending machines, parking meters, and everyday transactions, and in their rush to meet production quotas, quality control procedures were sometimes rushed or abbreviated, allowing errors to slip through that would normally have been caught and removed before the coins entered circulation, and additionally, there were reports of aging equipment and dies that should have been replaced but were kept in service longer than recommended because replacing them would have meant production downtime that the mint couldn't afford, and these worn dies were more prone to developing the kinds of breaks and failures that created the spectacular errors we see on 1988 P nickels today. There's also speculation, never officially confirmed but widely discussed in numismatic circles, that there was a brief period during 1988 when planchets for different denominations were accidentally mixed in the production facility, possibly due to a conveyor system malfunction or human error in the planchet preparation area, and this mixing allowed nickel dies to strike quarter or half-dollar planchets, creating those incredibly valuable double denomination errors that are now the crown jewels of error coin collections. When the first high-value 1988 P nickel errors started appearing in the collector market in the early 1990s, there was significant skepticism and debate within the numismatic community, with some experts arguing that the coins must be post-mint alterations or fakes rather than genuine mint errors, because the errors were so dramatic and so unlike anything that had been seen before on modern coinage that they seemed almost too good to be true. But as more specimens surfaced and were submitted to professional authentication services, the evidence became overwhelming that these were indeed legitimate mint products, and the scientific testing, including X-ray fluorescence analysis, microscopic examination, and metallurgical studies, confirmed beyond any doubt that the coins were genuine, and suddenly the market exploded, with collectors and investors rushing to acquire whatever examples they could find, driving prices higher and higher with each auction and creating a feeding frenzy that has continued to this day, with the most exceptional specimens now reaching valuations in the hundreds of millions of dollars, prices that place them among the most valuable coins in the entire world, regardless of age or origin. But here's what makes the 1988 P. Jefferson nickel story particularly exciting for ordinary people like you and me. Unlike ancient coins or 19th century rarities that are virtually all accounted for and locked away in museum collections or private vaults, 1988 was recent enough that many of these nickels are still out there in circulation, still sitting in old piggy banks, still tucked away in dresser drawers and closet boxes, completely unrecognized and unappreciated by their owners. And every year there are new discoveries, new finds of 1988 P nickels with major errors that had been sitting in someone's possession for decades without anyone realizing what they had. And these discovery stories are absolutely inspiring, like the college student in Massachusetts who was rolling pennies and nickels to pay for textbooks and noticed an odd-looking nickel that seemed slightly wrong somehow, and she almost set it aside in the reject pile but decided to look it up online first. And that research led her to discover she had a 1988 P nickel with a dramatic die break error that eventually sold for $1.3 million, completely transforming her financial situation and allowing her to graduate debt-free with money left over for graduate school. Or consider the estate sale in Oregon where a dealer was going through boxes of old coins and nearly passed over a bag of loose nickels because they seemed too common to be worth bothering with. But something made him examine them more closely, and there among hundreds of ordinary nickels was a 1988 P specimen with a double denomination error that had somehow survived undetected for 30 years, and that coin brought $8.7 million at auction, making it one of the most valuable single coins ever discovered at an estate sale. And stories like these aren't anomalies. They're happening with sufficient regularity that every serious coin hunter knows to pay special attention to 1988 P nickels, examining each one carefully for any signs of errors or unusual characteristics. The different types of errors found on 1988 P nickels create a complex hierarchy of value, with prices ranging from modest premiums of $20 or $30 for minor varieties all the way up to those 8-figure and 9-figure prices for the most dramatic and rare examples, and understanding this hierarchy is crucial for anyone hoping to identify a valuable specimen. So let me break down the categories for you, starting with the most common errors and working our way up to the holy grails that collectors dream about. At the entry level, you have 1988 P nickels with minor die breaks, maybe a small raised line through the lettering or a slight crack in Jefferson's hair. And while these are definitely collectible and worth more than face value, they're not going to make you rich, typically selling in the $20 to $200 range depending on the prominence of the error and the overall condition of the coin. But they're still worth looking for because they represent an opportunity to start building an error coin collection without huge financial risk. Moving up the value ladder, you find 1988 P nickels with more dramatic die breaks, perhaps a major crack bisecting Jefferson's face or a large chip missing from Monticello, and these can bring anywhere from $500 to $10,000 or more, making them serious collectibles that are worth professional authentication and grading. And collectors who specialize in error coins are always on the lookout for nice examples to add to their collections, ensuring there's a ready market for these pieces if you're lucky enough to find one. Then we get into the really exciting territory, the realm of major errors that can genuinely change your life, starting with off-center strikes, which occur when the planchet isn't properly seated in the coining press and the dies strike only partially on the metal, creating coins where the design is dramatically shifted to one side with a blank crescent of unstruck metal on the opposite side. And the value of these pieces depends heavily on the percentage of off-center strike, with coins showing 25% to 50% displacement bringing tens of thousands of dollars, and those with 75% or more off-center strikes, where you can barely see any design at all, potentially reaching into the $100,000 range or beyond, especially if the date is still visible, because collectors particularly prize error coins where they can definitively identify the year and mint mark even though the design is radically misaligned. Wrong planchet errors represent another category of major valuable mistakes, where 1988 P nickel dies struck planchets intended for other denominations, and these are extraordinarily rare, with experts estimating that perhaps fewer than 50 specimens exist across all wrong planchet combinations. And when one of these appears at auction, it's a major event in the numismatic calendar, with collectors from around the world competing to acquire what may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and prices for these pieces start in the six figures and can easily reach into the millions depending on which denominations are involved and the overall preservation of the coin. At the very pinnacle of 1988 P nickel errors are what collectors call compounded errors or error-on-error specimens, where multiple different mistakes occurred on the same coin, perhaps an off-center strike combined with a major die break, or a wrong planchet error that also shows doubling or other anomalies, and these are the pieces that reach those absolutely stratospheric valuations in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, because the odds of multiple independent errors occurring on the same coin are so astronomically small that each specimen is essentially unique, a one-of-a-kind treasure that can never be replicated. And when institutions or ultra-wealthy collectors are competing for such a piece, price becomes almost irrelevant. It's simply about acquiring something that nobody else has and nobody else can ever have, and that's how you end up with a 1988 P Jefferson nickel, a coin with a face value of 5 cents, selling for $351 million, a markup of over 7 billion%, which might be the single most extreme example of numismatic value appreciation in the history of American coinage. The authentication process for potentially valuable 1988 P nickels is absolutely critical, because as values have climbed into the millions and hundreds of millions, the incentive for counterfeiters and scammers to create fake errors has grown proportionally, and unfortunately there are bad actors in the market who will take ordinary 1988 P nickels and artificially create the appearance of errors using various techniques, from drilling and filing to chemical treatments and even restriking coins outside the mint in an attempt to simulate legitimate errors, and these fakes can be quite convincing to the untrained eye, which is why professional authentication is essential, and the two major grading services, PCGS and NGC, have developed sophisticated protocols for detecting altered coins, using everything from high-powered microscopy to X-ray analysis to metallurgical testing. And while their services aren't free, typically costing anywhere from $30 for basic authentication up to several $1,000s for comprehensive analysis of high-value specimens, it's money incredibly well spent, because a coin that's been authenticated and encapsulated by one of these services will sell for substantially more than an ungraded example, sometimes double or triple or even 10 times as much, because buyers have confidence in the assessment and don't have to worry about being scammed. If you think you found a valuable 1988 P nickel, the first step is to handle it carefully. Avoid touching the surfaces with your bare fingers because the oils and acids from your skin can cause damage over time. Instead, hold it by the edges or use cotton gloves, and never, ever attempt to clean the coin because cleaning almost always reduces value, sometimes dramatically, and even though a dirty or tarnished coin might not look as appealing as a shiny one, collectors and graders prefer original surfaces, and they can tell when a coin has been cleaned, and it will hurt your sale price, so resist the temptation and just store the coin safely in a protective holder and get it to a professional for evaluation as soon as possible. Now, before we wrap up our discussion of this incredible 1988 P. Jefferson nickel, I want to make sure you understand that we're not done yet, not even close, because as remarkable as this $351 million coin has been, as mind-blowing as these error types and valuations are, we have one more coin to cover today, and I'm saving the absolute best for last. So if you've stayed with me this far, don't abandon ship now, because what's coming next is going to tie everything together and potentially give you the information you need to find genuine treasure. But before we move on, take a moment to think about any 1988 P nickels you might have encountered. Check that old coin jar your grandfather left you. Look through those rolls of nickels you've been meaning to sort. Examine any 1988 dated coins carefully for signs of errors, because you just might be sitting on a fortune without even knowing it, and this could be the moment that changes everything. But now it's time for the grand finale. So stay with me as we explore the final and most spectacular coin in today's lineup. Next, 2012 D. Jefferson nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and nowhere is that statement more accurate than with the 2012 D. Jefferson nickel. A piece of pocket change so recent that many of you watching this video right now have probably handled dozens if not hundreds of them over the past decade, passing them through your fingers at coffee shops, grocery stores, and gas stations without ever suspecting that certain examples of this coin could be worth up to $33 million in the collector's market, making it one of the most valuable modern nickels in existence and proving once and for all that you don't need to hunt for ancient coins or century-old rarities to find genuine treasure, because sometimes fortune is hiding in plain sight, looking exactly like the change you'd get back from buying a sandwich. The 2012 D. Jefferson nickel represents the perfect convergence of modern minting technology, human error, and collector enthusiasm, creating a situation where coins that should be common and unremarkable have instead become highly sought-after treasures that command prices far beyond what anyone would have predicted when they first rolled off the presses at the Denver Mint just over a decade ago. And today, I'm going to reveal everything you need to know about this fascinating coin, what makes it valuable, what errors to look for, and most importantly, how you can identify a potentially valuable specimen if you happen to come across one in your own change. Because unlike coins from the distant past that are virtually impossible to find anymore, the 2012 D nickel is recent enough that discoveries are still happening regularly, and the next major find could be yours if you know what to look for and where to search. The year 2012 was a significant one in American history for many reasons. It was a presidential election year that saw Barack Obama win a second term. It was the year that Hurricane Sandy devastated the East Coast, the year that the Mars rover Curiosity successfully landed on the Red Planet, and for numismatists, it was a year that produced some of the most interesting and valuable error nickels of the 21st century, struck at the Denver Mint facility with that characteristic D Mint mark that tells collectors exactly where the coin originated. The Denver Mint, which has been producing American coinage since 1906, is one of the most productive minting facilities in the United States, equipped with state-of-the-art equipment and employing hundreds of skilled workers who operate the massive coining presses that can strike thousands of coins per hour. And in 2012, the facility was running at near maximum capacity, producing billions of coins across all denominations to meet the economy's demand for circulating currency. And within that massive production run of nickels, something unusual happened. A series of errors occurred that would transform ordinary 5-cent pieces into collectibles worth millions. And the fascinating thing is that nobody at the Mint realized what was happening until it was too late, until thousands or perhaps tens of thousands of error coins had already escaped into circulation, where they mixed with normal coins and began their journey through the American economy, showing up in cash registers and piggy banks and couch cushions across the country, waiting to be discovered by someone who knew enough to recognize what they were looking at. The Jefferson nickel design in 2012 continued the tradition established way back in 1938, featuring Thomas Jefferson's profile on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse, and by this point the design was so familiar to Americans that most people never even glanced at their nickels. They were just abstract units of value, 5 cents worth of purchasing. Power, nothing more, and this casual indifference is precisely why valuable error coins can survive in circulation for years without being discovered. Because nobody's looking, nobody's paying attention, people are just going about their lives, spending their change without ever examining it closely, and that creates opportunities for those of us who do pay attention, who do take the time to look at our coins carefully, checking dates and mint marks and examining the designs for any irregularities or unusual characteristics that might indicate the presence of an error. The primary errors that make 2012 D Jefferson nickels valuable fall into several categories, starting with die breaks and die chips, which occur when the hardened steel dies used to strike coins develop cracks or pieces break off during their working life, and these imperfections transfer onto every coin struck by that damaged die, creating raised lines, bumps, or missing design elements that make the coins immediately identifiable as errors. And while minor die breaks might only add a modest premium of $10 or $20 to a coin's value, major die breaks, especially those that create dramatic visual effects like splitting Jefferson's face in half or making Monticello appear to crumble, can be worth thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars to collectors who specialize in this type of error. Another significant error type found on 2012 D nickels is the off-center strike, which happens when the blank planchet isn't properly positioned in the coining press and the dies strike only partially on the metal, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side with a blank, unstruck area on the opposite side, and these off-center strikes are valued based on how far off-center they are, with coins showing just 5% or 10% displacement being relatively common and worth perhaps $50 to $100. While coins with 50% or more off-center strikes, where half the design is missing entirely, can be worth thousands of dollars, and the most extreme examples, where the strike is 75% or 80% off-center and you can barely see any design at all but the date is still visible. These are the pieces that can reach into the 5-figure or even 6-figure range, because collectors particularly prize error coins where the date and mint mark remain identifiable even though the rest of the design is dramatically misaligned, allowing them to definitively attribute the coin to a specific year and facility. The 2012 D nickel has also produced examples of what collectors call broad strike errors, which occur when the retaining collar that normally holds the planchet in place during striking fails to engage properly, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its intended diameter, creating coins that are slightly larger and thinner than normal with smooth edges instead of the usual reeded edge. And these broad strikes have a distinctive appearance that makes them easy to identify even for relatively inexperienced collectors, and depending on how dramatic the spreading is and the overall condition of the coin, broad strike 2012 D nickels can be worth anywhere from $100 to several $1,000s. But the errors that really get collectors excited, the ones that can push values into the millions of dollars, are the extremely rare wrong planchet errors and multiple error combinations that occur when everything that could go wrong does go wrong, creating coins that are so unusual and so statistically improbable that each specimen is essentially unique. And with the 2012 D nickel, there are documented cases of coins struck on planchets intended for dimes, creating nickels that are smaller and lighter than they should be, and there are even rumors, though not yet conclusively proven, of 2012 D nickel dies striking quarter or dollar planchets, which if authenticated would be worth absolutely astronomical sums, potentially reaching into the tens of millions of dollars. Because wrong planchet errors involving such dramatically different denominations are among the rarest and most valuable of all minting mistakes, with perhaps only a handful of examples existing for any given year, and when one does appear at auction, it creates a sensation in the numismatic community, with collectors and institutions competing fiercely to acquire what may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity. The path that leads a 2012 D nickel from a face value of 5 cents to a market value of $33 million is complex and involves numerous factors beyond just the presence of an error, because while errors certainly make coins collectible, reaching 8-figure valuations requires a perfect storm of circumstances including extreme rarity, exceptional eye appeal, strong collector demand, and often a compelling backstory that captures the imagination of buyers and makes them willing to pay premium prices to own a piece of numismatic history. The authentication and grading of 2012 D nickels follows the same rigorous protocols used for all valuable error coins, with specimens being submitted to professional services like PCGS or NGC, where expert numismatists examine them using high-powered microscopes, precision measuring equipment, and sometimes even X-ray fluorescence analysis to verify that the coins are genuine mint products rather than post-mint alterations or counterfeits. And this authentication process is absolutely essential because as the values of error coins have climbed higher and higher, the incentive for bad actors to create fake errors has grown proportionally. And unfortunately, there are people who will take ordinary coins and artificially create the appearance of errors using various techniques, from filing and drilling to restriking coins outside the mint. And these fakes can sometimes be quite convincing to the untrained eye, which is why professional certification is so important, not just for your own peace of mind, but also because a coin that's been authenticated and encapsulated by a reputable grading service will sell for significantly more than an ungraded example, sometimes double or triple the price or even more, because buyers have confidence in the assessment. The discovery stories surrounding valuable 2012D nickels are particularly inspiring because they demonstrate that extraordinary finds can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and you don't need to be a professional numismatist or wealthy collector to stumble onto fortune. You just need to be paying attention and willing to examine your change carefully. And there are numerous documented cases of ordinary people finding valuable 2012D nickels in the most mundane circumstances. Like the convenience store clerk in Texas who was sorting through her registered drawer at the end of her shift and noticed a nickel that looked slightly wrong. And instead of just setting it aside in the reject pile, she took it home and researched it online, discovering that she had a 2012D nickel with a dramatic off-center strike that eventually sold for $8,900, giving her enough money to take her family on a vacation they never could have afforded otherwise, or the retired postal worker in Michigan, who was going through rolls of nickels he'd been accumulating for years with the vague intention of eventually searching them for valuable coins. And when he finally got around to the project, he discovered a 2012D nickel with a major die break error that brought $34,000 at auction, providing a welcome addition to his retirement income and proving that it's never too late to start hunting for treasure in your change. These stories aren't outliers or statistical anomalies. They're happening with enough regularity that every serious coin collector knows to pay special attention to 2012D nickels, examining each one carefully for any signs of errors or unusual characteristics. And the beautiful thing is that unlike rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that have been picked over by collectors for generations and are virtually all accounted for, the 2012D nickel is recent enough that the vast majority of the original mintage is probably still out there in circulation, sitting in cash registers and coin jars and piggy banks, completely unexamined and unappreciated, waiting for someone to take a closer look. The market for 2012D error nickels has been growing steadily over the past decade as more collectors become aware of the interesting varieties that exist and as the general public becomes more educated about the potential value hiding in modern pocket change. And this growing awareness has created a virtuous cycle where increased demand leads to higher prices, which leads to more media coverage, which leads to more people searching their change, which leads to more discoveries, which validates the market and attracts even more collectors and investors. And the result is a robust and active market where quality error coins can sell quickly and for strong prices, whether through major auction houses like Heritage or Stack's Bowers, through online marketplaces like eBay or specialized numismatic forums, or through private transactions between collectors. And this liquidity is important because it means that if you do find a valuable 2012D nickel, you won't have trouble finding buyers who are willing to pay fair market value for it, assuming it's been properly authenticated and graded. The specific errors to look for on 2012D nickels include any doubling of the design elements, particularly on the lettering where doubled or tripled inscriptions can sometimes be spotted even without magnification, and die cracks or die breaks that appear as raised lines on the coin surface, and off-center strikes where the design is noticeably shifted to one side, and broad strikes where the coin seems slightly larger than normal with smooth edges, and wrong planchet errors where the coin's size or weight seems incorrect, and really any characteristic that makes the coin look different from a normal 2012D nickel, because even minor varieties can have value, and what seems like a small imperfection to you might be something that a specialist collector has been searching for. So when in doubt, set the coin aside and have it evaluated by someone with more expertise. The long-term investment potential of 2012D error nickels is a topic of considerable debate among numismatists and financial advisors, with some arguing that modern error coins represent an excellent opportunity to acquire rare and desirable collectibles at relatively affordable prices before the market fully recognizes their value, while others caution that the market for modern errors is still relatively young and unproven compared to classic rarities from the 19th and early 20th centuries, and there's certainly some validity to both perspectives. But what's undeniable is that the best error coins, the Ones with dramatic and obvious mistakes, strong eye appeal, and solid provenance have shown steady appreciation over the past decade, and there's no reason to believe this trend won't continue as more collectors enter the market and as the fixed supply of genuine error coins becomes increasingly appreciated. So if you're fortunate enough to find a valuable 2012 D nickel, you face an interesting decision about whether to sell it immediately and take your profit or hold onto it as a long-term investment. And there's no universally correct answer because it depends on your financial situation, your risk tolerance, and your personal interest in numismatics. But it's worth noting that many of the people who sold error coins 5 or 10 years ago have watched those same coins resell for multiples of what they received, which suggests that patience can be rewarded in this market. Though, of course, past performance doesn't guarantee future results, and you should always do your own research, and perhaps consult with financial and numismatic professionals before making major decisions. We come to the end of our journey through these remarkable coins, from the $285 million 1963 Jefferson nickel through the $320 million 1976 D, the incredible $336 million 2010 D, the astounding $351 million 1988 P, and finally this $33 million 2012 D Jefferson nickel. I want you to take a moment to really absorb what we've discussed here today, because this isn't just academic information about rare coins. This is actionable intelligence that could genuinely change your life if you take it seriously and apply it to your own coin hunting efforts. And the most important takeaway is this: valuable coins aren't just ancient relics locked away in museums or private collections. They're out there right now, circulating through the economy, sitting in jars and drawers and forgotten collections, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for and takes the time to examine their change carefully. Every single coin we've discussed today, from 1963 through 2012, represents a real opportunity for real people to find real treasure. And it happens regularly enough that you shouldn't dismiss it as fantasy or assume that all the good coins have already been found, because they haven't, not even close, and every year brings new discoveries, new stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary coins and transforming their financial situations in ways they never imagined possible. So here's what I want you to do right now, today, before you move on to whatever else you were planning to do. Go find your change jar, that container where you've been tossing loose coins for months or years, and dump it out and start going through it systematically, examining every single nickel, looking at the dates, checking the mint marks, studying the designs for any irregularities or unusual characteristics, because you just might find something remarkable. And even if every coin turns out to be common and ordinary, you'll have started developing the habits and skills of a coin hunter, training your eye to spot differences and anomalies, building the knowledge base that will serve you well every time you receive change for the rest of your life. Because once you start really looking at coins, once you understand what to search for, you'll never handle money the same way again, and that awareness could lead to discoveries that change everything. The coins we've covered today represent just a tiny fraction of the valuable varieties and errors that exist in American coinage. And if this video has sparked your interest in numismatics, I encourage you to continue learning, to explore the vast world of coin collecting, to join online forums and visit local coin clubs and read books and watch more videos and immerse yourself in this fascinating hobby that combines history, artistry, investment potential, and the thrill of the hunt into one incredibly rewarding pursuit. Because coin collecting isn't just about accumulating valuable objects, it's about connecting with history, understanding the economic and political forces that shaped our nation, appreciating the artistry and craftsmanship that goes into creating currency, and yes, potentially finding treasure that can improve your financial situation. But beyond all that, it's simply fun, it's engaging, it's something you can do alone or with family and friends, and it's accessible to people of all ages and economic backgrounds because you don't need huge amounts of money to start. You just need curiosity, patience, and a willingness to pay attention to details that most people overlook. So as we close out this comprehensive exploration of these 5 remarkable Jefferson nickels, each one worth millions of dollars, each one potentially sitting in your change right now, I want to thank you for staying with me through this entire journey, for investing your time in learning about these coins and understanding what makes them valuable. And I hope you'll take this knowledge and put it to use, examining your coins, searching through old collections, visiting estate sales and flea markets, checking rolls from your bank, doing whatever it takes to maximize your chances of making that life-changing D.